Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all of our participants and guests. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed with our next session, that is Conference Paper 6. Topic for this session is Towards Human Governance and Ethical Leadership, and you will be hearing the presentation from Your Eminence Yang Berusaha Encik Azlan Shahrom, Chairman of the Board of Trustees for Insan Sidik Berhad. During presentation, for any inquiries, participants can leave the message or feedback in the chat room at the conference website. Message will be read during question and answer session. But before we begin, allow me to introduce our presenter. Encik Azlan Shahrom is a graduate of Electrical and Electronic Engineering from the University of Sheffield and began his career through 13 years in the semiconductor industry with Intel Penang. He then spent 3 years in the service of the government of Malaysia, including a period with the Ministry of Higher Education, which provided first-hand exposure to matters of national policy and administration, while developing a broad appreciation of work cultures in both private and public sectors. He has held senior management and leadership positions in organizations relating to education in school, including as CEO at Sapura Smart School, before becoming the inaugural CEO of Yayasan Amir, leading the development of Malaysian Trust School program in the partnership with the Ministry of Education. He presently chairs of the Board of Trustees for that Insan Sidik Berhad, a non-profit organization that advocates integrity as a human issue and set out to educate and cultivate future generations who are morally, intellectually, and spiritually accomplished person. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Yang Berusaha Encik Azlan Shahrom.
Terima kasih Tuan Pengacara Majlis. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. My thanks to the organizers for this honor. However, this honor is not mine to be had this morning. 4 days ago, a very dear friend, teacher, educator, passed away. I think we were all here to listen to Arwah Professor Arfah to deliver her paper. News of her passing on Saturday morning came as a shock, and I must say, in my case, it was particularly surprising and almost confusing, because not more than 2 hours before I heard the news, I had received a WhatsApp message from Prof Arfah through WhatsApp. It wasn't a message, it was an attachment, and I thought nothing more of it, because we often exchange articles and things of interest. It was only after coming back from Arwah's house that afternoon that I looked at the presentation, and what I found was the presentation before us today. So a cold sweat, and in discussing with her close associates, we felt that this was probably an amanah for her, for me to convey her presentation. So the organizers very kindly reminded me how there are hundreds of participants and people from all around the world, but to me the greatest pressure is to try and do justice to this presentation, and inshallah I might be able to convey the essence of her presentation. Perhaps before we begin, if I might invite us all to give our thoughts to Prof, as is our customary way. Al-fatihah. Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic we have before us is towards human governance and ethical leadership, a topic which was very close to Prof. Arfah. And in fact, she was the co-founder of the Human Governance Institute. And therefore, I think what we're going to hear today is something which is, a culmination of 14, 15 years or more of her work. Inshallah, I shall be able to try and do some justice to it. Let's see. So we find ourselves today in I think, in very unique circumstances, and there's no doubt that the preeminent thought in everyone's mind is that of COVID. But having said that, this actually provides a very interesting background and setting, if you will, for us to think of what has transpired over this last year. How much have we taken this event to pause, to reflect, and to think about how we conduct ourselves? And perhaps more importantly, what do we intend to do moving forwards? In the context of leadership, what is presented to us now, therefore, is an opportunity to identify a new narrative for leaders, and one that is founded upon human governance. In order to do this, however, there are a few things that we need to do, and what I hope we shall be able to share this morning are thoughts along those lines that may help the participants to ponder this question. The first being that in order to think about human governance, we need to acknowledge that there are various models of the nature of human. And I hope as I go through Arwah's slides, we'll see that many of us are probably stuck in one established view, when in fact there are indeed many models of the nature of human. And what then becomes important is that we need to reflect on that and connect the model with our own belief system, and find a model that is compatible with our belief system and one that we can therefore propagate. Obviously, there will be challenges in doing this because we're talking about changing very set mindsets. So in wanting to move forwards, we have to take a step back. We have to review our foundational assumptions and see where that takes us. So what are some of these assumptions? As I mentioned, the model of the creation of humans, the role that we play as humans, our place in the universe, in the cosmos, how we interact with science, with human thought, and ultimately the choices that we make, the choices that we find ourselves taking within the ecosystem that we exist. When I looked at this, this slide takes me back to school, obviously. This is, any student who will remember the science books, the typical view of the evolution of man. But if we pause, take a look at this, and ask ourselves, and certainly in the context of leadership, what does it mean to be human? Is it just a matter of evolution taking us to where we are today, And indeed, whose worldview actually impresses this upon us? And with the advances that are taking place in the world today, is it actually a fact, something that's happening, where we may even be moving away from being Homo sapiens to what Prof refers to as Homo robotic? And to lay a bit of context on this, if we look at, for instance, the advent of the Industrial Revolution over the years, over the ages and centuries, industry, kicked in circa the 18th century, and man found ways to become more and more productive. So machines, the steam engine and all that made it easier for us to get work done. Things which would take days became a matter of hours or minutes. In the second phase of the Industrial Revolution, mass production came into being, and the overwhelming abundance of material things started to escalate. Yeah. Then, as we moved into more recent times, if you look at the IR3, and obviously now everyone is talking about Industrial Revolution 4. That earlier slide of Homo robotus becomes less and less of a stretch of the imagination, because so much of where we find ourselves now is very much driven by technology, and the role of humans inadvertently becomes increasingly mechanistic. We're all guilty of it. We're all glued to our devices. Our children are all glued to devices. The way we conduct ourselves, it is very much could be driven. Certainly very tightly woven with technology and machines. Yeah. So the thought, the pause for thought is where we headed. And on that note, what is the role of the human today? I alluded to the pre-industrial era. During a time when religion was very much a part of life. And in those days, leaders were probably first and foremost viewed as people who were entrusted to care for their people and community. Amanah, driven primarily with people in mind. But as the industrial era took hold, what we began to see is that economic man started to come to the fore. And even more recently, if we think back to it, back in the day, the phrase human resources did not exist. Yeah. Today it is commonplace, so much so that I think we may sometimes forget or lose sight as to what that term may imply. It implies that man and woman are now resources. We are workers, and as IR4 progresses, may we even be deemed to be machines. We are there to produce. In this day and age, the legal person, companies, if you will, corporations, have the same rights as humans. This is something which was, inconceivable. But today, a legal entity, which may be represented by a face, but it is an entity, has rights, and in many cases the same rights as humans. And what also has gradually taken root is that our behavior has become one which, as I said earlier, is very mechanistic. We have become very rules and regulations driven, and to the point where at times one has to wonder whether that is at the expense of moral values and ethics. Have we become so accustomed to following rules, regulations, and SOPs to the point where we forget to actually question and ask about the meaning? Why do we do things? Or have we become mindless? In that regards. So there has absolutely been a shift in the role of humans, and as I coursed through the deck multiple times these past few days, I think one takeaway that we should hope to get from this is that we must pause. We must ask ourselves, when we are thinking in terms of leadership and all that, we must go back to the basics. Leadership is not just about driving organizations to optimize outputs and what have you, but who are we? Who are the leaders? And who are we leading? So it warrants some thought and consideration of what organizations are, because when we talk about leadership, invariably we will relate that to the role of a leader in an organization. Organizations, in many cases, may now have become a collection of objects. So again, is it people or is it objects? What makes up an organization? Any organization worth its salt today will have many KPIs to be met. Actually, when I saw this, I was reminded of when I started as an engineer at Intel in Penang, and I think it was Hashim, my first supervisor, manager. He told me, he said, Azlan, you are a process engineer, and there are indicators that you must be responsible for. So one of them would be mean time between failure of the equipment on the production line. So he told me, he said, you can stand at the machine every day, and every time it jams, you quickly clear it. And effectively, your indicator of mean time between failure is very good, because it doesn't fail. You intervene all the time. But he says, don't forget, the indicator is just that. What matters is the process. You should be making sure the process is healthy, so that the indicator will reflect a healthy process and not the other way around. And I must say, in the years I've had the opportunity to be in different roles, it's very easy to become a slave to indicators. And again, we forget the meaning behind what it is that we are actually trying to achieve. Yeah. So this is something which probably describes many organizations today. And the point here is that so much so that when we talk about governance and integrity, it oftentimes gets viewed as something like that, as something external, as something that we have to measure. But how do you measure integrity? Is it something that you can measure? As we go through the presentation, hopefully that will, instill some thinking on this matter. Let me then share this slide, which describes. I think this is a very wonderful depiction of the environment that we live in today, which surprisingly many people may not think about or realize. In the 1970s, when Nixon basically decoupled the dollar from gold. What happened in effect was money lost its value. Yeah? It's a matter for another discussion. There are many references on YouTube that people can look up, but fiat money came into play, right? So again, think back to those earlier slides when pre-industrialization, when human beings were about human growth, real tangible things that we produce. We now live in an environment where the global, the financial economy, the growth of the economy is really premised on a foundation of loans. And so banks today basically create wealth. And again, I won't venture to go into it in detail here. There are many places where one can look this up. But versus the days when money and more importantly currency actually reflected tangible goods that we were trading. Money today is created literally out of thin air. Actual currency, the ringgit or dinars or whatever that we exchange, in many countries only represents about 3 or 4% of actual currency in circulation. Everything else exists in the ether. And so when individuals look to procure a loan, my naive thinking from before is that Zol puts in 100 ringgit in the bank. I want a loan, so the bank passes me his 100 ringgit. It doesn't happen that way. I go to the bank and say I want to buy a car or a house. Bank looks at my credentials, says he seems to be like someone who can pay it back. The balance sheet suddenly, they create credit, debit. I now owe a certain amount of money, and now there is money in the system. Yeah, so a lot of this growth then also takes place in the stock exchanges. Now, in many cases, yes, you put equity into companies for them to produce things, but that line gets very blurred. Yeah, and of course, consumerism is front and center in our lives today. Yes. And media plays a big role in keeping this whole engine running. So what has invariably happened is that today we live in an economy of corporations. The point being that where does the well-being of the human feature in this? Is that in fact the driving impetus behind what drives us to grow, the economy, or is it actually turned the other way around? Now, again, during this COVID period, there are a lot of examples to be had, a lot of discussions or debates or arguments to be had. Who is being helped? Is the man and woman on the street getting help? Is it the corporations getting help? Again, sensitive topic. I don't want to delve into it, but I think it is poignant to point out that Prof. Arfah had this thought, and I think we are seeing it happen around us, and it is incumbent upon us to think about what can be done about this, or at least be aware of it. So how did we get to this point? This next slide, I think, has kept me awake the most. I do not have the depth of academic insights that I call her Kakak, my late sister, had. So I shall try my best to convey this slide. But what she wanted us to think about is, in all of this time, how did we end up where we are? And this goes back to one of the earlier slides where we talk about religion and spirituality in the mind and being of man. So round about the 16th century, I think really at the point when heliocentricity kicked in, I think this is when classical science, if you will, started to really take root. Yeah. So as we know, okay, so this is back to our history books from school. Big arguments, more than arguments, between the church and the scientists. Yeah. No, the Earth is not the center of the universe; it is the sun. But what happened, and throughout the so-called period of enlightenment, so with the likes of Descartes and Newton, they started to propagate the thinking of the material world, right? And in doing so, the non-material world became more and more separated. Yeah. So from a time when man was much more all-inclusive in the thinking, we started to see a separation of thought, and so even in terms of philosophy, there was that thought of, well, there's science and natural philosophy, and then there is that of moral philosophy. So again, we're seeing a diverging of paths, and so that leads to the notion of classical science and religion being almost incompatible, if you will. They're two different paths. Having said that, what has happened in relatively recent times is the advent of quantum physics. And quantum physics actually has turned classical science on its head, right? So from a situation when science and non-science disciplines were taking one trajectory, what quantum physics actually did was, in a sense, bring us back to the earlier integral view. Yeah? And I will elaborate on that a little bit more in the following slide. But what's worth noting is that Arfah refers to it as the Dark Ages, before classical science really sort of took off. What we found in the East was that the thinking of man, be it the Chinese, the Indian, the Greeks, the Persians, the Islamic scholars, was still very much an integral view of our existence. And over time, as the advent of classical sciences took root, it started to, I would say, to erode the thinking of the East. And again, I think for myself, my takeaway from this slide is, again, to pause and to think. I think those who knew Arwah knows that she would very rarely say, "You are wrong," but she will always say, "Well, that's your view based on, how you perceive certain things." And so, clearly, science and classical science is not wrong. we won't have a lot of these things if it was. But I think the point is that, is that complete divergence something which is the right path to continue, or should we be looking back almost? And again, I think what's so interesting and exciting, if you will, about the advent of quantum physics is that for those who may find the notion of the unseen from a religious view to be something difficult to grasp, quantum physics tells us that only 4%, is visible. I, for the life of me, cannot figure out string theory until now, but it is obviously something that is there. So in this big cycle, as man has advanced, it would appear that what we were doing and thinking in the past, maybe was not that far off. Yeah. And reference to Locke, this notion of tabula rasa, the blank slate, the clean slate. He posited that man is a blank slate. We go to schools, we go to university, we live our lives, and we populate, we fill the slate. We then add to our self. Yeah. But as a slide coming up will prompt us to think, what of the soul? When a child is born, is the child not without soul? So we are not necessarily. In fact, we would say we are not a blank slate. We do have something within, but it is a matter of nurturing and developing and bringing it out. Yeah. So much so, I think in Louisiana there was this incident where the Science Education Act had to come about because there were such strong views from both sides. You had parents who were purely on the side of science and evolution and would not allow the teaching of intelligent design, if you will, in schools. Yet you had parents who felt that no, there's a creator, there is that is part of who we are. So imagine, in this one instance, an act had to actually be constructed to permit schools to teach, two different perspectives. Yeah. So, question here is, what intervention do presents itself to us now? So we talk about leadership, talk about leaders. What drives? What is our motivation? What drives our thinking? Are we aware of how over the centuries things have taken, a turn of events? And how does that? I try to relate this back to our beliefs. How does this jive with our belief system? And therefore, are we content to continue as is, or are we going to take this period to pause and think about how we might, do things differently? So again, to take this a little further, if you look at the slides where it talks on the one hand classical science, and on the other quantum science, from those various ages, where, as I mentioned earlier, the model of the universe way back then was very, very mechanistic. But now, there's this notion and understanding of a conscious universe, how we exist as an ever-expanding network of interconnected relationships. Again, so in the past, where perhaps the concerns and thinking were often rooted in material and physical matters only, today that has not gone away. Material, physical is very much part of our world, but we also need to recognize that there are limitations to what we can see, touch, and understand, and that there is something beyond. And again, as I say, I think for those who are religiously and spiritually rooted, this is something that we take as a matter of course. We talk about roh, that you cannot you cannot quantify it, but we believe, yes. But what's interesting is that, and so again, maybe this is something which is more relevant or of impact to the Western world, where there might be less of link to religious thinking. Quantum physics actually starts to describe this phenomenon. Yeah. So I guess the point is that you can look at it from quite differing vantage points, but the message seems to be coming up that the unseen is real and it needs to be considered. Yeah. So we no longer can accept ourselves merely as a detached observer of events. We are very much part of that. And again, going back to school, secondary school sciences, I suppose, we think about the properties of light. You choose to see it as a particle, you run an experiment, you will see it as a particle, but you choose to see it as a waveform, you will see it as such. So we are not merely observing, we actually are an integral part of what happens by being there. Yeah. So I think the takeaway here again is that as human beings we are relational. We are not standalone, independent beings. We are very much relational beings, and this has to be something which we bear in mind, as we think about the roles of leaders. Yeah? So one decision point perhaps to be made here is, do we continue with the old line of thought where it's mutually exclusive, either or, or which I think, to be honest, today in economics, in politics, this very much remains the norm. Or do we start to expand our thinking and realize that it is not about a mutually exclusive existence? It is both being part of the environment and living it. Just to drive this point, I guess, home a little bit more, Prof will often quote Descartes' dualism. Yeah, again. The two have been propagated as being very separate and dealt with independently. Really almost like a bifurcation between mind and body. But if I may paraphrase Einstein, I think one of his quotes was that what can be counted can be measured, but what can be measured may not count. Right? So there is this notion that there are things which are important, but it may be beyond the realm of res extensa. It may be in the realm of res cogitans. But we exist in both these realms, right? And so again, what drives our decision making? What motivates us to do things? We do need to step back, pause, and think of what are our foundational beliefs that drive us to make decisions. So where do we go? Where do we go from here? We're going to have to make choices. Yeah. Lots of vaccines are starting to come into play. There is obviously great hope around the world that that things will approximate how things were before. Yeah, the oft mentioned the new normal, but actually, is it a new normal, or is it again an opportunity for us to really sort of reflect and reset? When I see this slide, it actually chokes me up a little bit, because Arfah put this slide in, if I'm not mistaken, on Friday. We can only guess, but I think there was so much that she wanted to share. Perhaps she knew that there wasn't that much time. I believe UITM has copies of the books, and it can be found online. I would urge, if time permits for the participants and the opportunity presents itself, have a look, read through these books. There's so much, as I said, of her thinking that has gone into it, which will help, be it the university administrators attending this conference, or I understand there are lots of emerging leaders who are in attendance as well. Be aware and conscious of your thoughts, because ultimately, our actions have meaning when we know who we are and what it is that we are trying to accomplish. Yeah. So begs that question: what is our baseline of what it means to be human? Are we committed to this paradigm that we were all taught some more years ago than others? Are we accepting of the fact that with how the world and technology is transforming, that the man machine is actually one form of human, or back to this question of what is our belief of the existence and the being and the importance of the soul. Is a newborn child born with soul, or as Locke would have put it, that no, we are a blank slate and it is our experiences that make us who we are. I think the point being, and I hope that participants are aware of this, there are many, many models of human creation. So beyond the mainstream view, perhaps that most of us are familiar with, in different models, you do find the role and place of soul, of God, of personality, having an interplay, making us who we are. Yeah. If we look at the little chart at the bottom there, again across Greek culture, Islam, the notion of the spirit, the notion of soul, and the notion of the body does exist. Yeah, but the question really is, how do we make this a part of our life and decision making? Arfah was very keen of talking of the Japanese model. In fact, when she first talked to me about this, she cited an example of how when an American company and a Japanese company were coming together in a merger and acquisition, whilst everything seemed okay initially, it could not work out. And upon reflection, what they found was that in the Japanese culture, there is a very distinct appreciation of the outer and the inner self. Yeah, and again, this notion that we consume ourselves predominantly with the external, we forget what it means to be human inside, and that is where the connections, the relationships take place. Yeah. So again, food for thought. We talk about belief systems. Majority of the world would believe, in one form of religion or other. Yet, oftentimes we find that such beliefs are sidelined when it comes to developing and shaping the codes and structures that govern us. Yeah, those codes, do not almost always do not acknowledge the soul. It acknowledges the external, and therefore drives us to behave in that way. Very poignant, I think, at this point in time, the sense of community. I'm actually often amused when we look at the news from around the world. In some communities, the importance of the community is is front and center. Yeah? In some other places, this notion of personal rights seems to need to trump the importance of community. So today in the audience, we don't think twice about wearing a mask because we care about each other. The good of the community has to be a central part of thinking when we think about leadership and what it means to be human. Very quickly, I think in 2005 there was this work by Krieger and Seng where they did a comparative study of the Abrahamic religions and Buddhism and Hinduism. You'd be able to look through this later when the materials are posted on the website. But again, there is a commonality across the board where leadership is derived from within. It does not come from external. It has to come from within, and it, the fact that this comparative study shows this commonality across the board is very telling indeed. So we do have challenges in wanting to move forwards. Two things that I'd like to share. The first has to do with education. And here I'm taken back to, I guess, 10, 15 years ago when I was at Mohi. Soft skills was the big, the big rallying cry. We have to inject soft skills into our graduates, to make them employable. Yeah, and what if you look at it, what that's basically saying is that our education is premised on building up skill sets. And then we say, oh, but by the by, we need to make sure that our graduates have all these soft skills. And eventually, even the notion of integrity and ethics, moral values, become seen as soft skills that needs to be overlaid. So it's a bit of a patchwork, yeah. And even when that evolved some, to the extent that integrity and ethics was then given importance as a skill set of its own, it still took the approach that was a skill set that had to be developed. Yeah, I'm sure even now between industry and academia, we have arguments as to, hey, you're not training up the graduates well enough for them to start work, and in the universities we say, oh, hang on, that's the job of industry. Let's turn that thought on its head. Rather than saying that these soft skills, integrity and ethics is something that you build up, you build up, consider the fact that being human is the foundation. So my own domain is more in K-12, so I take this very close to heart. In schools, we need to make sure that the young are inculcated with this development from early on. Yeah, human attributes, the belief systems. This is the foundation. Everything else builds on top of that. So when we talk about employability, as someone who's had to interview people for work in industry, I'm only marginally interested if this person has a CGPA of 4 or 3.8. I'm more interested as to the person's attitude, the person's outlook, interests, levels of energy. These are not things that you learn, as a subject, because I know that when they come into our workplace, if there are new challenges, if he has or she has the right stuff, they will pick it up, right? So you do need the basics, but the building block really should be about the person. Yeah. So we need to think about moving from a scenario where we are enamored with producing workers for specific roles to nurturing humans who will work. regardless what that challenge might be. And they will be very adaptable. Yeah? Move away from a focus on skill sets to one where human values becomes the foundation upon which the skill sets are built. And this concept of epistemology and ontology today, it's quite likely that if you tell a young child it's going to rain, having looked up from his smartphone, he'll probably say, okay, it's going to rain. Yeah? But what we should hope for is that they think beyond that. So more from an ontological perspective, you know what to do with that knowledge and information. It's not just about, okay, there's a theory, you've given me a fact, and so be it. Yeah. So drawing to a close now, the question is often asked, human governance. What I would say is that the emphasis of HG is on the H. It is about the human. It's not about the governance. Yeah, because to think that we can measure human governance, integrity, you can measure it, but it would be external. Simple example of integrity, if you talk about corruption, if someone were to do a corrupt act, you can see it, it is external, and you can measure that. But what drove the person to do that? That's inside. You cannot measure that. So sometimes there are maybe discussions as to whether corporate governance is superseded by human governance, and I think Arfah was very clear. The two coexist. It comes back to that question of perspective. Yeah, we have to realize that the inner self is very much an important part of who we are. So you must have both, and you have to understand them for what they are. So to wrap up, the topic that was given was the challenge of moving towards human governance and ethical leadership. I think what we'd like to leave the participants with is that perhaps before even going there, we need to think about moving towards human governance by human leaders. Because the ethics and leadership will follow, but we must know who we are first. There is an opportunity now for us to shift, to pause, reflect, yes, and recognize again that the non-visible is very much a part of our world, of who we are, and there has to be balance between being solely driven by external factors, data, analysis, but there is a place for intuition. Yeah? And therefore we must give emphasis to the relationship between humans, and that perhaps with this, those who are reflecting on their roles as leaders and administrators might take a fresh perspective on where to go. I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that inshallah I have to some extent been able to convey Arwah's thoughts for us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Azlan. Very well, ladies and gentlemen. Now we proceed to the question and answer session. We have one question from Sulaiman Kazim Abiodun, one of our international participants. His question is, what is your advice on how to manage human-computer interaction in order to shape a student into leadership path? Okay.
I would go back to the fundamental message from this morning's paper, which is, that there is nothing wrong with technology. It is very much part and parcel of our world. But if there's perhaps one takeaway from the paper that was presented to us, I'm just conveying the message. I think it is that we must always seek to understand the meaning of what we do and why we do things. and the fact that, being human, that the meaning rests within us. Yeah? So when you talk about interaction of or using technology and teaching, I'll give you an example. This was from my Intel days when I was doing education programs. We had a program which involved teaching project-based learning to students. I won't give them free advertising, so I won't mention the name of the program. But we used technology. We used the internet. We got students to use PowerPoint and all the rest of it. But the lesson there was not about knowing how to use all these ICT tools. What was important was that the children were learning to work collaboratively, to obtain information from various sources, to synthesize, and then to present. The tools were just that. It facilitated, it in many cases made things easier, but we had to always remind ourselves and the teachers and the students and the parents, don't get excited about, oh, now you've got computers. It's what you do with it. So perhaps that's an attempt of addressing that question. I hope it helps.
Thank you, Mr. Azlan Shahrom. Ladies and gentlemen, what an interesting and informative session by Mr. Azlan. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of the session. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank Yang Berusaha Encik Azlan Shahrom for addressing the topic and for sharing with us your experience and knowledge on the subject matter. And thank you to all participants for your active participation. Hopefully, the presentation will be beneficial for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.